Hey guys, how you doing? It is March 7th, 2010. I'd just like to read you some of an article I found. This is done by James Quinn on March 4th, and it's from Financial Sense Editorials. Kind of an interesting article. I'm not going to read it all. I'm just going to hit the high points. It's called Recession, Depression, or Systemic Breakdown. The National Bureau of Economic Research is an arbiter of business cycle recessions. Okay, they're going to define recessions and depressions. They define a recession as a significant decline in economic activity spread across the economy, lasting more than a few months, normally visible in real GDP, real income, employment, and industrial production. Okay, so those are the factors that they look at those categories to define and see where we're at in the economy. So far, 3.7% real decline from December 07 in the GDP. Personal income declined by $339 billion. Let's see, 8.1 million less people employed today than there were in 2007. Okay, so that's unemployment is going up, to say the least. Industrial production is down 12%. National bankruptcies has risen from 800,000 in 07 to 1.4 million in 2009. That's a 75% increase in national bankruptcies, and we're still seeing records broken in the foreclosures and bankruptcies right now in the first 2 months of 2010. Exports and imports declined 22% and 31% respectively. The U.S. dollar has fallen 17% in value in the last year. And since the Fed's inception in 1913, the dollar has lost about 95 to 98% of its purchasing power. And I think in their own words, they said that the reason why they exist is to stabilize monetary policy, and it's been anything but stabilization. Look at the charts. 140 banks failed in 09, with 700 banks on the danger of failing list. I think that's a spun number also. I think it's much higher than that, just based on their numbers that they've done in the past. To date, the Federal Reserve has printed well over $1 trillion in an attempt to evade deflationary collapse, including a $700 billion bank bailout and a $787 billion stimulus package. And you guys remember, $787 billion they pumped into the system. Otherwise, we would see 10% unemployment. You remember Paulson saying that, don't you? Well, guess what? And then there was the $3 billion wasted cash for clunkers. That's irritating, because people got more into debt. They bought cars potentially that they didn't need, turned in their cars that were running perfectly fine, and then they destroyed the cars, perfectly running cars. That hurt the economy too, I believe, because why not send those cars to used car dealers? That didn't help out anybody. And then also there was a $28 billion that was squandered on the $8,500 home buyer tax credit. I have a friend that's been waiting for his $8,000 check. Jared, he's been waiting for it for 8 months. Hasn't got it yet. Sorry about that, Jared. Feel for you. An artificial suppressing of interest rates to zero with 300 billion mortgage-backed securities, and they artificially held those low to blow up this bubble and cause housing to go where it should have never gone. Let's see. There's a few other paragraphs I'd like to read to you. The fact is that the U.S. banking system has seized up, with many banks now deserving the label of zombie banks. Collectively, these zombie banks have hundreds of billions in toxic assets sitting on their balance sheets. Bankers know that there is an avalanche of option arm and Alt-A loans that will reset in the next 3 years, setting off another bout of foreclosures. Bankers know commercial real estate is crumbling. And friends, that's happening right now. Bankers know credit card and auto loan defaults are soaring. They will not lend in this unforgiving environment. They want to hold on to the money that they do have. They're not going to lend money out in an economic depression, because chances are they're not going to get it back. The worst lies ahead for the banks. I'm going to go down here. Federal Reserve. That's enough about the Federal Reserve. It's depressing. His conclusion is that the tipping point for hyperinflation occurs when the government's deficits exceed 40% of its expenditures. The deficits being run by the Keynesians in Washington are now at that level, well beyond anything ever attempted in U.S. history. And you look at the chart, boy, 08 hit, and the deficit's just straight up, and we can't sustain that unless we take drastic measures right now and turn this thing around and stop spending money. That's the only way out, friends. And we have manufacturing again. Our leaders have chosen to allow insolvent banks to keep toxic assets on their books at inflated prices, propped up by bankrupt union-controlled automakers, instructed by Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac and GMAC to make loans that will never be repaid, and squandered the $787 billion on payoffs to congressmen through pork projects, and stimulated nothing. And I think we all realize that it did nothing to stimulate the economy. And if there was some stimulus, there was a blip of growth, it was because of stimulus, which is an artificial economy. It's man-made, so to speak. It's not real. With unemployment at 10.2% and headed higher, the Federal Reserve has absolutely no intentions of raising interest rates. President Obama and Timothy Geithner can do 100 interviews declaring that reducing deficits is a huge priority, but their actions speak louder than their lying words. The national debt increased by $1.8 trillion in 2009 to $11.9 trillion. And friends, I think it's higher than that. The truth is that the deficits will exceed $1 trillion annually and approach $2 trillion. Okay, last paragraph here. There is no foreign country willing to buy the $13 trillion of debt paying 1% we will need to issue in the next 10 years. Obama and Congress are working on another stimulus program, clearly indicating that they are going to continue their efforts to spend the country out of this crisis. Okay. You saw the deficits. I mean, the deficits are going. Just Google the deficit, and you'll see the charts that it's going straight up. And they're planning on continuing that with another stimulus. Trust in the American financial system and its leaders is dissipating rapidly. At some point in the not-too-distant future, the U.S. Treasury will attempt to sell debt, and foreign buyers will boycott the auction, saying basically, we don't want your debt. That will mark the point of no return. The unprecedented levels of debt propping up the American empire cannot withstand higher interest rates. Okay, friends, we're struggling now. If they raise the interest rates, that will further collapse the economy. Because it's hard right now, and banks aren't lending right now. If they raise interest rates, that's insanity. When it collapses under the weight of its massive debt, the dollar will crash and hyperinflation will result. People need to prepare for the future turmoil and uncertainty. And friends, and then it goes into some investments and stuff like that. I don't think even those are safe. So, guys, I think it's better to prepare and to know, beforehand, so you can make good decisions. I think that's prudent. And, there's the only people that aren't talking like this article is the mainstream media. They're the only ones not saying this. Almost everybody else is telling you, hey, it's not over, and it might get a little tougher. So hang in there, guys. You can find work. If you have work, hang on to it if you can. Anyways, I better end this, otherwise you're going to tell me it's too long. Take care and have a good night. Sorry about the doom and gloom.